Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon from wherever you are. My name is Shadrach Kolomnyak, a second-year law student at Kabarak University, and I serve as a committee member of Faith and Environment Project at Kabarak University. And I'll be your moderator for this panel. Allow me to acknowledge the presence of our distinguished panelists. We are excited to have you here, to have you with us here. And to our audience, thank you for joining us. To introduce the Faith and Environment project at Kabarak University, faith is a strong drive for behavior change, and when confronted with a triple planetary crisis, we will probably look at a strong drive for behavioral change like faith. We aim to create a platform to encourage Africans to do what we need to do in confronting or as a way of handling a triple planetary crisis while creating a space for African intelligentsia. Faith and Environment Project at Kabarak University is a research advocacy initiative led by Kabarak University Press. It aims to promote knowledge and practice on faith value and environment. So in light of this, welcome to our panel. And the theme for this panel is Climate Reparation, Harnessing Indigenous Knowledge, Beliefs, and Philosophies for Climate Justice. For this discussion, feel free to use the chat function. And when we get to the Q&A session, if you want to ask a question, you can request for the mic. Today, we have 4 panelists. Our first speaker is Dr. Teresia Muzoni, a lecturer at Kabarak University. She is the managing partner at Rubicon Landing LLP, specializing in connecting businesses with the right capital to meet their growth goals. With over 15 years of experience in investment and risk management, she brings deep expertise in private markets. She helps entrepreneurs secure funding efficiently while offering investors well-structured opportunities that balance risks and return. Her work is grounded in a strong understanding of regulation, task, and compliance from both investors and insurer perspective. Welcome, Dr. Teresia Muzoni. Our second panel is Reverend Justus Mutuku, again Provost, Kabarak University. He's the University Provost for Spiritual and Student Affairs at Kabarak University, where he oversees the institution's spiritual life and student welfare. He previously served as the university chaplain for 10 years, fostering a supportive environment for staff and students, an ordained minister with the African Inland Church of Kenya. Reverend Mutuku is a respected preacher and a member deeply devoted to his faith. Academically accomplished, he holds multiple degrees in theology and bioethics and is an active member for professional bodies like ATET BSK and NAUCC, reflecting his dedication on both scholarship and pastoral care. Welcome so much, Provost. Our third panel is Dr. Alutala. Is a representative Braham Kumaris in Nairobi. He's a medical scientist, consultant, and Braham Kumaris environment representative at United Nations Environment Program. Welcome, Ms. Dorcas Alusala. Our fourth panel is Lucy Plummer, the SIG representative UNEP Faith for Earth Interfaith Women Council member, is a Buddhist. Lucy Plummer is a member of Soka Gakkai International SGI, a global community-based Buddhist organization which promotes peace, culture, and education. It's SGI's representative on youth engagement at United Nations, UN. She is a doctoral student at University of Bath, UK, currently completing a PhD in policy research and practice. Her research focus is on youth engagement in sustainable development policies. Welcome, Ms. Lucy Plummer. Our fifth panel is Professor Ibrahim Ozdemir, is the Vice President for Academic Affairs, America Islamic College. Vice President for Academic Affairs, American Islamic College, Environmental Philosophy and Ethics, Environmental Justice and Philosophical Counselor. His academic background encompasses various facets of philosophy, including ethics, environmental justice, ecology, and religion, practical ethics, philosophical counseling, and critical thinking. This interdisciplinary approach allows him to understand and address environmental justice multifaceted challenges comprehensively. He has published an article entitled "The Evolution and Future of Religion and Ecology: The Insights from Muslim Environmental Thoughts." He has also published a chapter entitled "Sustainability and Communities of Faith: Islam and Environmentalism in Indonesia." We at Kabarak University, we are honored to host such a distinguished panel. This juncture, allow me to welcome Dr. Teresia Muthoni, who will give us the first presentation. Dr. Teresia Muthoni, you are welcomed.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm most grateful to join this panelist and to add my voice to matters climate and environment. And this afternoon, I think the person introducing will have to do a revision of the panel of the of my profile, but it's okay. So the issue I'm presenting today is Laudato Si. As you can see, I am a Catholic sister. So meaning my background is of the Catholic religion. And that means we stand very closely guided by the Roman Catholic Church. And one of the most followed document that Pope Francis of happy memories gave was the Laudato Si. So the Laudato Si is an encyclical that came around 2015. And this was a call to care for our common home. So it is care for our common home, meaning the earth. And Pope Francis, as you can remember, took the name Francis after one man who is called Saint Francis of Assisi, who lived in the 12th century and who was an environmentalist. So it is said that St. Francis could even talk to animals because of how he had bonded with nature and the environment. But then what Holy Father was trying to bring to us is a concern to bring the whole human family together to seek a sustainable and integral development and to foster a new dialogue on how we shape the future of our planet. This has become as a result of the many things that have been happening in the world. And you can see that is in 2015. And to date, the Catholic Church is implementing the Laudato Si encyclical, following closely what what Pope Francis tried to bring. Of course, this was prompted by the fact that the Catholic Church is a worldwide Christian denomination, and it says that it has around membership of almost 800 million. And Pope Francis intended to bring this message to each and every person, and through the persons who get this encyclical, to take it to all other persons. And you can imagine how many people were reached unto that. And the major concerns that the Laudato Si bring out are quite a number of them. I'll just highlight. We have pollution and climate change. We have the issue of water. We have the issue of loss of biodiversity. We have a decline in the quality of human life and the breakdown of society. We have global inequality, and we have what he was calling weak responses. So for him, if we are to care for our common home, that is the Mother Earth, the first issue that we must address is pollution and climate change. And you see, he found that there is a lot of sicknesses. So the poor environment affects so many sectors in life. It affects the health of the people. It comes about with many sicknesses because of the industrial fumes, substances that are used. The agricultural sector use of chemicals have got so many effects. So you find that at the end of the day, the person you are ministering to as a Christian has got so many issues that affect him and which are related to the climate and the environment. He also wanted to bring to people on matters of pollution for us to see climate as a common good. I think we all understand the concept of common good. The concept of common good is that what you do and what I do, does it benefit everyone? So is it for the benefit of everyone or is for the benefit of few who could be selfish? So he talks about combating global warming and helping the world to produce more fresh air and more freshness. Now, the second issue that Pope Francis brought about was the issue of water. And this is about water wastage. And as I was listening to the first panel, I heard about the action, the call to action that everyone is called to. So I realized that the call to action is how do you waste? How wasteful am I as a person? So Pope Francis' message in its simplicity calls everyone to action. There is the big picture of the industrial pollution, but there is also the small picture of you and me, especially in with regard to waste. And which he talks about water wastage and food wastage, that we must reduce the culture of wastage. And I think this is a call to each and everyone, and particularly when we talk about leaving taps open, water leaking, that is an environmental issue. Wasting away food and that food continue to be produced, that is an environmental issue. And then as we do all that, we look at the global inequality and how the poor countries are affected by the actions of the rich countries and how that come at our door points, even in our society, the diversity of inequality. So if we do not take care of the common water, the rich person will be able to buy a bottled water for drinking. But what about the poor person who has to go to the river and the river is already spoiled? So the call for action is the you and me and our daily practices and how they keep the environment. So I think I want to reach it there. I didn't ask how many minutes I have, but Shadrach, I think I want to reach my presentation there on the Laudato Si. In my second part, I will talk about how we are implementing the same. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Teresia Muzoni. Apologies on how I introduce you. Apologies. I really apologize. So, to our second panel, Reverend Justice Mutuku, welcome.
Just a minute, I was caught up, so I needed just to someone else to say something, and then I will come last because I was held up a bit, and I needed to be clear whether what you raised is exactly what I want to respond to. Would you do that for me? I was just caught up, as you knew I was attending something, but I'm back.
Noted, Reverend Justice Mutuku. I'd like to welcome Ms. Lucy Plummer to give us his remarks.
Thank you so much. Am I audible? Just check.
Yes, you are. Please continue.
Thank you, Shadrach, and hi everyone. Greetings from the UK. Thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me to be part of this, important conversation on faith, environment, and climate reparations. So, if you allow me to briefly introduce Soka Gakkai International, or SGI, and share with you our understanding of climate reparation. So yeah, as Shadrach you introduced, we are a global community-based Buddhist organization. We're working on peace through culture, education, and peace activities. So SGI takes action on several global issues, and the climate crisis being one of them. And our approach is rooted in the principle of climate justice and focuses particularly on human rights, youth empowerment, women's empowerment, and learning from the experiences of local community responses. So to best convey how SGI understands climate justice, I would like to use the example of our advocacy for nuclear disarmament, which has been at the forefront of our peace movement for the past almost 70 years. So just for a bit of context, when the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki experienced atomic bombings that killed hundreds of thousands of civilians and impact the lives of countless more. And in the preceding decades, two power-yielding nations entered into a nuclear arms race, vying for supremacy in nuclear warfare. And this was really rooted in deep mistrust, owing to prolonged absence of human-to-human engagement or dialogue. And this Cold War dragged on for decades, which at one point brought the world to the brink of nuclear war, an outcome which would have had catastrophic consequences for the war, for the entire world, sorry. And it was against this backdrop that SGI's second president, Soka Gakkai president Josei Toda made the declaration in 1957 to a gathering of 50,000 youth in Japan, calling for the abolition of nuclear weapons. And in doing so, he left the task of achieving a world free of nuclear weapons to the youth members of SGI. And since this time, the youth of SGI have been engaging in an all-out struggle to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons, based on the conviction that the people of the world have the right to live without the threat of a nuclear attack. But in practical means, SGI struggling for the abolishment of nuclear weapons, it's much deeper. It's actually a struggle to affirm the dignity and preciousness of life in all its forms. So you can say it's a spiritual struggle against the devilish nature, of humans that denies the sanctity and preciousness of life. And in the truest sense, it's a real struggle to disarm our ways of thinking and the ways of thinking that justify violence to be inflicted on any individual, any group, or indeed on nature. So from this perspective, the root of the climate crisis that we are working on, and indeed all forms of violence against nature, including pollutions of rivers and the air that we breathe, is the same denial of life's dignity, which gave rise to the nuclear issue and many other issues in society. So our conviction in the necessity of climate justice is the same conviction that drives our action on nuclear disarmament, and that is that all life is precious and inherently worthy of dignity and respect, and no one, including no individual, no government, has the right to threaten or deny this dignity of life. So in order to realize climate justice, we believe that it's necessary to bring about a world where this principle of respect for the dignity of life is the fundamental value that is shared by all people and institutions everywhere. And for this to happen, it needs to take root in the hearts and the minds of people and be brought into fruition by engaging with one another based on respect. And when we can achieve such a world, then climate justice will be naturally justified. This is what SGI and its members are essentially working towards in daily actions to achieve climate justice. So I'll stop there. Thank you, Shadrach.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lucy Plummer, for your remarks. So I think, Janja, I'd like to welcome Professor Ibrahim Ozdemir to give his opening remarks.
Good afternoon or good morning, because from Chicago, here it is 3 a.m. It is 3 to 20 a.m. in the morning. But I am glad to be here. And I also just listened to panel discussion before me, young people, students. Then I am just, happy to hear from them. And there is a new generation who cares about the environmental problems, ecological problems. Let me hope faith-based institutions understand climate reparation, let me first, as Sister Tereshia said about Laudato Si, we Muslims also, environmentalists, we created a document, Al-Mizan, a covenant for the earth. Is a restatement of the principles of governing the protection of nature in a form that meets current challenges. It examines the ethics behind the social patterning of human existence and inquires into how they could be brought to life today, working in harmony with the heartbeat of the natural world. Environmentalism is deeply embedded in the veins of Islam. It is about personal behavior and how it manifests itself in our association with others, and also about being considerate in our relationship with the natural world and other sentient beings. Let me remind you, as Sister Teresa very well summarized the Laudato Si, we began to work on this document after the publication and declaration of Laudato Si, because our Christian friends, Buddhist friends, Hindu friends, environmentalist friends, and they call us, why you are not preparing, a document summarizing the Islamic perception of nature? Because as late Pope Francis said, our common home. Then who is our? It is in our. For the first time, maybe, the Pope included all people, because at the end of the Laudato Si, there was a call for all faiths, all traditions, in an holistic and inclusive way. This is very, very important. And I just see today, this morning, it is reflected in this, conference by Kabarak University, So from the perspective of Al-Mizan, a covenant for the earth, faith-based institutions understand climate reparation not merely as a financial or political mechanism, but as a moral and spiritual imperative rooted in justice, mercy, and restoration of balance within creation, as some was also underlined before me. In the Quranic worldview, every act of corruption on earth, whether social, moral, or ecological, is the disturbance of divinely ordained and created balance in the universe. Quote, in the Quran, it says, quote, corruption has appeared on land and sea because of what human hands have done, so that he may let them test the consequences of some of their deeds, that perhaps they might return. Chapter 30, verse 41. From this verse, Al-Mizan interprets the ecological crisis as both a symptom of moral imbalance and a call to return, that is, to repentance, ethical responsibility, and restorative justice. Thus, climate reparation becomes an expression of collective repentance, the acknowledgement of harm, restoration of rights, and renewal of covenantal harmony between humanity and natural world. Faith-based institutions, drawing from their moral capital, drawing from their moral capital, theological heritage, and legacy, frame climate reparation through three interrelated dimensions. First, moral reparation, recognizing that the degradation of ecosystem is a violation of divine trust. We say in the Al-Mizan, amana. Faith communities call for a moral accountability. Restoring the earth becomes an act of faith, a renewal of humanity's role as Khalifa, steward, then exploiter of the nature. Second, the social and ecological justice. Al-Mizan emphasizes the ecological imbalances disproportionately harms the poor, the marginalized, and future generations. Climate reparation thus entails redressing these injustices, compensating affected communities, protecting biodiversity, and ensuring equitable access to natural resources. Third, spiritual reparation. True reparation also involves inner transformation. Faith-based institutions seek to heal not only the earth but the human heart, reorienting desires away from greed, selfishness, narcissism, and consumerism toward gratitude, restraint, and reverence for life. Therefore, we use the bestowed trust. This trust, this word, all natural resources are bestowed upon us from God. So, in essence, from the El Mizan perspective, climate reparation is not a technical policy matter alone. It is a theological and civilizational response to humanity's betrayal of divine trust. It calls for ethical restoration, intergenerational justice, and renewed spiritual consciousness. So, faith based institutions serve as a mediators of this moral awakening, reminding humanity that to repair the earth is to repair our relationship with the Creator, with each other, with the web of life itself. In this spirit, we are working as Muslim to just to be once more to be stewards on earth. I will continue, later. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Professor Ibrahim, for the powerful presentation. Now, I'd like to invite Reverend Justice Mutuku, the Provost, to give us his remarks on how does faith-based institution understand climate reparation. Welcome, Reverend.
Sure. Thank you so much. My apologies. I thank the people who have gone ahead of me. I appreciate the view from the different setups. I'm also have been in part of faith-based organization, and I would like to make a few comments, just a few ones, but I'm mostly representing the Protestant traditions because I think my sister from the Catholic orientation gave something that was quite interesting on how the various traditions have done that. But in the Protestant, I must make a statement first that within the Protestant tradition, one of the big challenge we have had about the whole issue of environment and all that and ecology is the question of that we have had a theology that has always focused on saving the soul and saving the soul to secure space and a place in heaven. And at times that has really sidelined a number of other conversation partners like environment and all that. So you notice that that is one of the things that our theology in the Protestant has been the question of, our destination, our heavenly orientation. And so there has been, for a long time, very, very minimal emphasis on environment until some time later when some theologians began to engage and raise concerns on the question of an environment. And the other question, so that question of preoccupation with salvation of the soul and going to heaven has always sort of sidelined the conversation regarding the question of ecology. But the second dimension I would like to make mention is that within the Protestant traditions, there's a very strong inclination to the issue of the fall, the Edenic fall, the issue of how the fall of Adam and Eve in the Christian scriptures led into the birth of what I call environmental degradation, where we have had, like I keep telling some of you in the forum, those who have been before with me, that the question of interfering and disrupting an environment that goes all the way to the creation, the history of the Christian creation narrative, where Adam and Eve are involved in a way of interfering and cutting leaves to cover their shame and all that. And then the curses that followed them were mostly mentioned to follow even within the creation, that the earth will have challenges and all that. And so what I would like to say here is the way the Protestant tradition have understood the issue of environment or the question of climate justice has been a bit on what I call on the development part, because some of the theologies that have come up was, apart from concentrating on heavenly issues, was to concentrate on liberations of different types. And very, very little would you find in the Protestant theologians people talk about liberation of environment. There was liberation of people from oppressive systems and all that. And so for the Protestant tradition to be able to exercise and promote climate justice which I believe is the anchored in scripture. I think we need to go back to the hermeneutical challenge. Like again, I did say that before, how we interpret our scriptures, what rules, what governs how we interpret our scriptures, our script, so that it can incorporate a holistic. For example, in his vision, God's vision for creation was creation to exist in what we call interdependent nature of existence, where creation is one whole. If you look at the Christian narrative from Genesis and 1 and 2, you'll notice that the way God ordained and designed the creation was that creation will be interdependent. There will be what I call creation exists as a block, one block with several elements in it. And so one cannot exist on their own without the other. But there has been in the Protestant theologians to preoccupy ourselves with thinking that we may not have conversation on the environment, but assuming that journey to heaven and forgetting that we need the support the environment. If you look at the Christian narrative, you'll notice that the way God organized and reveals the way he organized the creation, it was clear that an environment played and plays the central role in God's economy of existence, of creation. And so there are four elements. I'll just to mention quickly that Protestant Christianity can really help in matters of climate justice. And because the teachings of Christian scripture promote four elements that are critical. One is the element of sanctity of life. Just a quick one, sanctity of life, and that like somebody my Catholic sisters did mention, if that concept is interpreted hermeneutically, translated well in scripture, it offers a very good starting point to begin to appreciate all things, all life is important. And that is very critical. Then the second element, because of time, it's a question of aesthetics. This is where some of the where the Catholic theologians are very strong. But that's an area where some of our Protestant theologians in the Germany and in some of those places engaged on the question of aesthetics, where we begin to appreciate it. Beauty is a calling, a responsibility of networking and participation of different other elements. And then the third element is a question of honesty and integrity. Basically, Protestant theologies should embrace that interpretation of the Christian scripture, which promotes a virtue that appreciates and is able to deal with the other elements of creation in a critical way. And then the final element that the Christian or the Protestant tradition promotes is the question of what I call stewardship consciousness. The fact that if you look at the creation narrative, God is inviting the first man and the first woman to a responsibility of caring for creation. If you look at the Christian scriptures in Genesis 2:15, Adam and Eve are invited to care and even rule over, but the care there and work on that garden involve the question of, entrenches the question of what we call stewardship consciousness. I believe these four pillars from this dimension are critical in enhancing how we begin to think differently about caring for the environment, about climate justice, the fact that we may need to begin to envision a new way. But I will say this again, moderator, that if we don't, for the Christian dimension, if we don't get a proper hermeneutics, a proper way of interpreting what has been meant as God's revelation, we will then always bypass and sideline the question of climate justice. But for the Protestant tradition, we are on the trajectory of beginning to engage. We are now hearing theologies of ecology, theology of environment. Seeing that we are not there. Initially was theology of liberation, theology of culture, theology of missions. But now we see a lot happening in our area where now there's a lot of environmental awareness and consciousness. So there is hope. But I believe these four pillars are so critical, provided by the Christian faith organizations with the proper hermeneutics. Then we are able to dive into the four pillars of aesthetics, stewardship consciousness, sanctity of life, and the question of integrity and honesty. Those will begin to mobilize the Christian circle and the Protestant circle in a right direction of rethinking God and God's vision of the creation as a block, as an interdependent, needing each other for that matter. I'll be making more comments on that. I just gave a highlight on where we are in the Protestant tradition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Proposed, for those powerful insights. I'd like to welcome Ms. Dorcas Aluzala. Ms. Dorcas Aluzala, will you please make us understand in what ways do faith values influence communities' understanding on climate reparation?
Wow, I have a problem with my camera. Sorry. I'm there now. No, it's gone. Okay, can you come again? I was trying to get my camera back.
Oh, thank you so much. I was requesting that in 2 minutes, will you please tell us in what ways do faith values influence communities' understanding of climate reparation?
Okay, thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Salsala from the Brahma Kumaris. Brahma Kumaris organization started in the 1930s from India, and it has spread to over 120 countries now. We teach meditation, and in Brahma Kumaris, we believe we take responsibility for your actions. Climate change is a result of human actions. So when we say that a community's understanding and all these, first of all, we have to look at ourselves. Everything starts with us. Who are we? If we say that there and me, I'm here and that is there, then that becomes a different thing. But if we address the question of who we are a part of a system, an ecosystem. We are not separate from nature. We are not separate. Because even if we look at ourselves, 70% of our bodies is water. 70% of the earth is water. So looking at that relationship, we are just an extension of everything out there. We are a part of everything that is happening. And what is happening out affects us, and what happens inside us affects the outside. So when we look at, I'll come to narrow down to what you want. When we look at the climate change and what is happening, it's all because of the activities, human activities. And we have gotten to a point where now we are not able to tolerate what we created. We did things that have led us to where we are. We are now not able to tolerate the type of, say, temperatures. We are talking of extreme weather. We are complaining, but how did we get here? We were part of it. So when we come to say that how communities and all this understand, first of all, we have to look at how we got here. And then we now start correcting that by taking responsibility. Issues of integrity should be actually at the forefront. The moral responsibility of what we have done. So, maybe to get out of it, so when we continue doing business as usual, and yet we say we want a change, are we really going to get a change? So we have to do what to do a turnaround. Look at ourselves, look at the environment, and say enough is enough. Can we now stop? So when we talk of actually like reparations and all these things, what are we trying to say? Are we trying to say somebody continues to do what they continue to do where they are, and another person steps in for them? So really, I find it funny. We have to really think again. think again, even before we get to the communities, and it's complex. The issues of reparation and all this is complex. Values, we need to look at what values are guiding us. Values such as respect for the environment, responsibility, humility, simplicity. We look at all these. Why do we need to do so? Why do we need to produce maybe so much, a lot of which will go to waste? When we talk of waste, to where? Because this earth is one. We are all here. Even if I throw something out there, it is still landing on the earth. It is still coming back to me because I'm part of that system. So when we talk of communities understanding, I think it's a bit complicated. Communities have lived as they have done for a long, long time in that ecosystem, which they understand very, very well. They have adapted to. And when we move in and disturb that ecosystem, we destabilize the harmonious a coexistence that was there. So maybe let me stop there so that maybe we go step by step. For now.
Thank you so much, Ms. Dorcas Andusala, for your powerful insights. So because of time, apologies. So, I guess this will be our last question because of time, and I will call the panel to give us their insights on, basing on their knowledge of in what ways do faith values influence communities' understanding of climate reparation as we finalize. So welcome, Professor Ibrahim. Welcome, Professor Ibrahim.
Yeah, thank you. This is a very, very good question and timely question. We always ask ourselves how our faith can help us with problems. When our faith was, formed, there was no such climate change. There was no environmental problems. There were no environmental injustices or racial injustices in society. But we know for sure that our faith, our religion, shaped our worldview or daily life. What is the meaning of the universe? What is the meaning of to be human? What is how our relation with the others? And this is why I think the Pope Francis, the late Pope Francis, called for, made a call to the whole world, to just remind us, remember our role as faith, member of faith or leaders of the faith, because although our faith is formed in the history, but we have three principles, three tools to how we can benefit from our faith, which shapes our life or worldview. First, retrieval. Second, reinterpretation. Third, reconstruction. We have to remember how our faith can help us. This is why there is Laudato Si. This is why there is a El Mizan, a covenant for earth. Then also the Hindu declaration of environment, the Buddhist declaration of environment. We all share a common concerns. We concerns about the environment, about the world, about the future generations. So we have to go to our legacy or resources for reinterpretation. How we can utilize our religious, texts and resources to help us to solve these problems. And then reconstruction. And this is why we are here. I really appreciate Kabarak University is just bringing us together. And, once more, let us to share. We have a common problem. It is not only the problem of India or America or Africa or Europe. It is a global problem. So, in the time of when we look at the environmental injustices in the world, then the faith can help us because Christianity, Islam, and all religions they have a very very strong emphasis on the protection of the poor, the needy, the neglected. So I think it is we can reinterpret our traditions and restructure new methods to address these problems. For us as Muslims, I am every day I am having very good news around the world from young people. They are organizing themselves. They are establishing NGOs. They are working, for a better world. For example, just young a lady from a Muslim lady, just with her friends, they just organized an initiative and they planted 10,000 trees. And this is a small, a small indication of a revival of consciousness in the Muslim youth. That many young Muslims know they are doing their MA and PhD in environmental philosophy, environmental ethics, or sustainability, because it is time. There's a lot politicians they are doing their job, but let us as religious leaders, religious scholars, and also people who concerns about futures. Just I am I have psychiatrist says one of the major problem of the modern society is narcissism, selfishness, greed. How without religious sincerity and devotion you can overcome greed, selfishness, and narcissism? How you can care about others if somebody don't care even about his or her family, children? How we can expect from these people to care about the future generations and Mother Earth? So let me conclude that it is time for faith leaders, members of religions to have an interdialogue, interfaith, to know each other, not to convince each other, about my religion is better than your religion. No, to understand each other, how we can work together, because the problem is common. We have to find a new ways how we can cooperate, how we can work together to solve this problem, to give people a hope based on our faith. Only people of faith can give hope, I think, in a genuine hope, I mean. Because if you believe in some powerful deity, we say Allah, you say God, or the other say, the Buddhist says another thing, it doesn't matter. But there's a metaphysical dimension of our faith and our religion. So we have to share this with the people and talk to each other and try to discover our common grounds, not the grounds which differentiate us, which brings us together. In this spirit, I really appreciate again the Kabarak University for doing such a great conference. And I just I listened to the young people, students panel before us. They filled me with hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Ibrahim. Really an honor. Thank you so much for your powerful insights. So I'd like to welcome Ms. Lucy Plummer in about 2 to 3 minutes. Will you kindly summarize your thoughts on ways that faith values influence communities' understanding of climate reparation?
Yes, thank you. I tried to be brief. So yeah, the heart of the environmental problems that we're talking about is division. The separation between humans and nature, which is the heart of Western modernity. So from the Buddhist perspective, we can reconcile this issue of division or separation by living with appreciation for the interconnectedness of life. So Buddhism can be described as promoting a type of humanistic philosophy because it focuses on the human being. However, it's not like a human-centric view of life. This humanism is rooted in a cosmological view of life. So it encompasses the universe and the cosmos. So it's not just in the realm of human society, but the whole universe. So in that way, it views humans in relation to all types of life in the environment, and each life equally, without distinction and discrimination, is existing in this web of life. So in our Buddhist practice, when we pray, daily, we connect our lives with this grand entity of life. And then this is followed by actions which support and uphold the principle of interconnectedness. So, for example, it could mean, having dialogue to resolve disputes in order to have a more harmonious family or harmonious workplace, becoming a good friend or neighbor, or committing to more sustainable consumption habits. So when we really understand that we are part of this web of life, we can then act in accordance to bring greater harmony. And I understand that African philosophy has a similar concept of Ubuntu, which I would be interested to hear more about and to learn. So just to sum, we can, as individuals, really challenge our own mindsets and our own attitudes and really awaken to a greater appreciation of life. And we have a principle called human revolution in SGI that really speaks to this potential that human beings have to revitalize our lives. And it's been a consistent theme of SGI President Daisaku Ikeda's peace proposals that he's written from 1983 to 2022. There's 40 in total. So in thinking about, Laudato Si and Al Mizan, which have really inspired not just followers of those religious traditions, but all people are called to action. These peace proposals are really rooted in this hope and action and this sense of people's empowerment, that we can all do something and we all have the potential to revitalize our lives. We don't have to always look externally for the solution. So I end there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lucy Palmer. I'm really learning a lot. I'm really learning a lot. I'd like to welcome Provost Mutuku in about 2 to 3 minutes, because at exactly 12 p.m. we are going to invite another panel to summarize his thoughts on ways that faith values influence communities' understanding of climate reparation.
Allow me to appreciate Professor Ibrahim, my sister Lucy, and Alusala. This is one of the dialogue I love being in, because for many years we have had people just sit in their small compartments and they want to be, I think somebody said, want to compete and they show who is better than the other. And I don't think that was in the dream of God. And I'm a very strong believer that there is a way we can be able to integrate each other's wisdom and ideas and understanding, and come out with a better way to intervene in the issues of climate. One of the key things, like I think I agree with the Professor Ibrahim, that the Christian teaching as a way of shaping worldview. But it must be, like I said, the interpretation of our Christian scriptures must be correct to produce a holistic worldview that embraces everything. Let me give you a quick example from the Christian scriptures, that the question of incarnation reminds me of why God values environment. I mean, if environment was not that important, it would not cost God from the Christian teaching to come to join humanity through the virgin birth. Remember him being hosted by the Virgin Mary. That's from the Christian teaching. And then I like this idea of the birth of Christ encompasses an environment. He was born in a specific geographical location, in an animal herd place. And you look at animals being brought around in the birth of Christ. And then if you move a bit and look at his ministry, he was involved in visiting lakes, going to mountains, for prayer. And like Lucy said, there's a lot that happens with the environment that can provide. I think it's Alusala who said something that I appreciate, that we are a whole ecosystem, that if you interfere with the trees, you're interfering with the oxygen that we breathe. And look at God himself in the Christian teaching, coming down and through incarnation, spending time being enhanced in an environmental setting. And so I believe there is a lot that we, and even if you look at the teaching of Christ, he referred to an environment like the beauty of the flowers, the grass of the field. He was already engaging and incorporating environmental dimensions in his teaching. And so the way I think the Christian ethos can shape understanding of ecosystem is maybe we need to be forefronters in advocating for what I call stewardship consciousness, that we are a whole ecosystem. We are one. We belong to each other. We know what happens to the rivers when there are floods. Here in Kenya, we have had floods which damaged families. When there is a lot of emission of gases, there's a lot of issues. Carbon dioxide are messing up people. So whichever way, I think, even for what Abraham said, Professor, that Christianity can also bring values that can be contentment, issues like contentment, not being greedy, not wanting more and cutting trees unnecessarily. And so when I look at that, stewardship consciousness, shaping worldview, inculcating values that appreciate environment, and finally, I think through the Christian scriptures, I see advocacy culture, the culture of advocating for things. The prophets were advocating for certain things, and I don't see Christians advocating for that. And so Christianity can really enhance a culture of advocacy for environment, for various aspects of environment. I wish I can say much more, but it is so anchored in scripture that truly God himself, who is incarnate, reveals the necessity of environment and why environment matters, and it's part of the ecosystem that we are to be in. Thank you.
I just want to thank Brother Mutuku and say that we American Islamic College in Chicago, cooperating with DePaul University, is a Catholic university, hope we can cooperate to teach our students our values and let them to work together to find some solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Because of time, I'd like to welcome Sister Teresia Mudhoni to give us her closing remarks on ways faith values influence communities' understanding of climate reparation. Welcome.
Okay, I will just give my parting shot on what Laudato Si has called all of us to care for our common home. And there are two aspects, what we call the universal communion, that when we talk about coming together, it is all of us. It doesn't matter your faith background, because what you do affects everyone. So, and then number two, a change of lifestyle. So my faith values every day when I read the scripture calls me to change my lifestyle. So in changing the lifestyle, how do I change the environmental issue? And then the last thing that Pope Francis called upon is on responses. And these responses are responses from the individual all the way to the state level. And this is where the issue of reparations come in. Because when you talk about weak responses, we are talking about how do nations respond to the issue of climate change. Is it for their own good or for the good of the common good of everyone? So if there is anything we should take away from this conference, is that your action, my action as a faith-based person, is very pertinent in shaping how we see the worldview, as Provost has said, changing our worldview and seeing it as our common home that require our common effort to make it a good place to live in. Thank you very much. And thank you. Nice meeting all of you. Professor Ibrahim, Provost, I know you by name. I have seen your face today. I'm indeed happy and humbled to have been invited to hear that the Buddhists have a perspective like ours. Ms. Dorcas, thank you very much. I'm indeed humbled.
Thank you so much, Sister Mudhoni. So, Ms. Dorcas Aluzalo, would you like to give us your final thoughts as you summarize because of time? Less than 2 minutes.
Yes. Okay. So for me, I think the faith communities, I feel, should work together and also sit at the table where environment issues are being discussed, so that whatever is being decided, we are a part of it. And then, because we all teach values, There is no faith that doesn't teach values. And it's only values that can drive this world. Without values, we lose direction. So faith has a very important role. We should sit at all discussions, starting from the top, even with the people, the manufacturers, all the way to the community. We should be part of the system, not sit at the side and just observe. It is our duty, actually. It is our duty. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ms. Dorcas Alasala, for your precise thoughts. They are really great. Because of time, please forgive me. Because of time, I can see the next panel. The next panel is already in. So I'd like to thank all of you for joining. I'd like to thank Ms. Lucy Palmer for joining from UK since morning. I'd like to thank Dr. Ozdemir for joining us at 2 a.m. at Chicago. It's really of great honor. Thank you so much. I'd like to welcome I'd like to thank our own provost for always supporting Faith and Environment Project. Thank you so much for all the audience for joining us. It was of great honor. For those with questions, will forgive me because of time. Thank you and have a nice time.
Thank you.
Thank you to you too.
Have a great conference.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Shadrach, for that wonderful session. We're now proceeding to another wonderful panel where we'll have Carson Kiburo as our moderator, and some of the panelists actually is Dr. Albert Mume, who's the UN Special Rapporteur on Indigenous Peoples. And we'll also have Lesle Jansen, the Managing Director of the African Community on Resources Rights Alliance, that is the ACRRA. And we also have Dr. Ayla, the Vale Alves from the University of South Australia. Thank you very much. If I butcher the name, I'll just, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I guess it's my time to take over. Thank you, Parisa. And welcome all to this webinar today. It's a great honor to have all of you here. And because of the time, I will go directly into our program. So good afternoon, good morning, respectful greetings from wherever you are. I'm truly honored to moderate this important conversation on indigenous cosmologies and climate reparations. My name is Carson Kiburo. I'm a member of the Faith and Environment Project, and also a legal researcher on indigenous land and biocultural rights. It's a privilege to welcome you on behalf of Kabarak University Press and our partners from across the world. So this session connects two powerful ideas on cosmology, that is how indigenous peoples understand creation, balance, and our responsibilities to nature and reparation. Now, how these societies heal from ecological and historical harm. We gather here as scholars, faith leaders, and students to ask, what does it mean to repair the earth, not only materially, but morally and spiritually? So, in Laudato Si, as the late Pope Francis wrote, in the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor are one and the same. And also we saw that in Al-Mizan, Alama Tabata, I'm going to have trouble in this, Tabatai reminds us that creation itself demands justice, that our debt to the earth must be repaid through renewal and not extraction. Wonderful words. So these reflections will invite us to think of the reparations, restoration of relationship. And for us in Africa, I'm reflecting on key decisions that have happened legally, and other winnings as well. We've seen that restitution can also mean cultural revival, returning land, dignity, and the voice to those who have guarded ecosystems for generations. Now, today's conversation will explore how indigenous cosmologies help us to imagine a fair and holistic climate reparations. For those who joined a few minutes ago, we've seen the depth of the discussions and how the worldview will reflect on how the environment runs. Having said those few remarks, I would like to invite my panelists and introduce them. We are deeply privileged to have with us three remarkable thinkers and practitioners. The reason why I'm saying three is not going to be three because unfortunately one of them could not make it, and we're still trying to download the video recording of the message. So let's talk about the people that we have here. So I have with us here Dr. Albert Barume, who is the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, whose work continues to shape global standards for Indigenous justice. Welcome, Dr. Barume. We also have our sister Lesle Jansen, whom we're still downloading the video recording. She's from South Africa, Cape Town, and she's the managing director of the African Community Resource Rights Alliance, ACRA, and it's a consortium that brings together African community-led perspectives on rights, restoration, and practical reparations. So I'm gonna see if we have a recording. If we don't have, it means we may have more time to get into depth and delve with now Dr. Barume and Dr. Alves, who is a lecturer at the University of South Wales, Australia. Thank you so much for sacrificing your time. We see that there's a huge time difference from where you are and where we are. So Dr. Alves has legal scholarship that bridges climate law and Indigenous knowledge systems. So welcome all, and thank you for joining us, whether you're in Nairobi, Cape Town, Adelaide, wherever. I've seen also some people are joining from, is it India? So thank you. I'll begin with all the panelists that we have, but let me begin with Dr. Barume. So to begin with, I'd like to invite both Dr. Barume and Dr. Alves, and you'll bear with me, Dr. Ayla, how to pronounce your name, sorry. I'd like you to reflect on how Indigenous cosmologies define climate reparation. I mean, in other words, when we speak of repairing the climate, what are we really repairing from the perspectives of Indigenous worldviews, right? So in the fluffy chair, Dr. Barume.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carson. Thank you for the organizer of this important event. Thank you for the invitation to this really important topic. Actually, today I decided maybe to go a little bit off track of the topic, not because the topic is not central, but because of my colleague in the panel who on climate change issue are much more experts on these matters. But let me make a point. As Carson said, I am the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right of Indigenous People. The mandate is mostly to follow up on state delivering globally on those rights to those specific communities. So I decided to, just in response to the major question, really to set some fundamental quite straight. Yeah, I'm talking to mostly an African audience, and Africa, and to a certain extent in Asia. The concept by itself of who are indigenous people, really people still struggle. So maybe having it in the title can still raise some eyebrows from certain corners. So I decided to, in answering to your question, while leaving the substance to my distinguished colleague, to just clarify a few things on really who we're talking about here, and to seize this opportunity I'm given to shed some light on what that concept actually means in Africa. You hear sometime in many countries, states saying we don't have indigenous people here, we are all indigenous to the continent or to the countries. And you hear some other states saying we really don't have, it's an alien concept, which probably is relevant to other regions. Why are we bringing this on the continent? And unless that clarification, that actually conceptualization sinks in, actually it becomes quite difficult to translate that legal framework, including on climate change. So I have to say, just to make two really points quickly, is that the African Commission on Human and People's Rights has clarified what indigenous peoples means in Africa. And it says it does not necessarily mean first inhabitant or existence on a given land or country, unlike other regions, but it means it's a call for justice. When communities in Africa self-identify as indigenous people, they are implicitly calling for a very particular historical wrong that they suffered from. And that historical wrong is grounded in a racial discrimination that targets their livelihoods or themselves. Themselves or their livelihood are deemed to be considered as savage, as something not should be allowed to exist in modern time. And therefore, that sort of pernicious, very specific violations leads to their ancestral use and occupation of land not to be recognized because actually it is seen as savage. So most of those lands were actually taken by states in Africa and are today most of those land protected areas or public land or taken by more powerful other African communities. So it's something very particular that has not affected all African communities, traditional African communities. When you scan the continent from Tunis to Cape Town, from Liberia to Somalia, not every single community in the continent have suffered that demeaning of themselves or their culture to the extent of losing their ancestral land. Those are the people for whom the legal regime on indigenous peoples, so indigenous with a capital A and a capital P, was construed for, to correct that very specific. So I thought it was really important to, so the regime, as you can understand, is actually built to achieve two major things. First is to restore those communities' right to self-determine their future by reconquering or recovering their ancestral land rights, without which obviously there is no concept of indigenous cosmology, because it's a recovery. So actually the climate change debate isn't relevant in a context where indigenous people rights have not been restituted or protected for. So I'll stop there, Carson, on your first question, just to show how the climate change discourse can become irrelevant when indigenous people's land rights and concept and the purpose of the regime have not been understood first. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barume. You've clearly given a depth of something that we're not even asked clearly from your vast legal scholarship. And I like the idea that you've brought about self-determination and linking it to cosmology. But now, let's go and deepen this conversation. I want to thank you for those insights. So what we are hearing already is that reparation is about relationship and balance. So we're balancing those relationships and the rights. And not only, so I would like to see the link now as we go to, money, technology, and rights. So I would like us to delve into the indigenous traditions that guide global climate debates. So Dr. Layla, Dr. Ayla, I'm so sorry. From your legal perspective, how have the courts approached the idea of climate reparations, given that the greenhouse gas emissions linger for centuries, as we see right now? And how can law meaningfully address such long-term harm? And importantly, how can the courts recognize those indigenous knowledge as best available science in these cases? You have like 5 minutes, as Dr. Barume has also shared his thoughts. Thank you, and you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Carson. Just checking if everyone can hear me well.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much for inviting me for to this panel. Honestly, it's an honor to share a panel with someone who's definitely much more expert than me, as Dr. Barume is. And please interrupt me, correct me anytime you want. I'm definitely not an expert in the climate change aspect. I'm more into the cultural heritage and heritage safeguarding. So I'll try to address that multi-layered question through the connection to culture and heritage, which I think pervades any discussion we have about Indigenous peoples. So in terms of courts of law, I wanted to bring not a judgment itself, but some views from quasi courts, so from treaty monitoring bodies that I think have addressed climate change in connection to culture in ways that I find productive. So sort of what I see as best practices and hopefully what's going to lead the other courts of law and actual courts of law in their decisions on this topic. And even though the courts like the human rights, not courts, bodies like the Human Rights Committee, the Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the Committee on the Rights of the Child, have recently shared views on topics that involve Indigenous peoples and climate change that I find very, very interesting. So we have Billy versus Australia in the Human Rights Committee, in the case of the Sami sisters versus Finland, in especially the Committee on the Rights of the Child, that have been approaching climate change with all this multi-dimensional discussion around it, which I find interesting because as it says already in some of the questions, and you mentioned as well, Carson, it is a broader crisis that has many different impacts. And at the same time, if it's not connected to the issue of land, like Dr. Barume said, it loses its relevance in the Indigenous context. So what I'm seeing in terms of interesting developments from these international quasi courts, these international treaty monitoring bodies, is that they have been approaching the issue of climate change with this broader perspective. So connecting the issue of climate change with how it affects intergenerational transmission of knowledge, how it connects to land, how it connects to access to natural resources, to discrimination, to sustainability. And I think that's more of the way forward. So I can't say that this is how courts of law have been approaching the topic. I think that would be very optimistic. But this is how some of those bodies, which are human rights oriented, have been perceiving this, which I think is positive generally. Just understanding that because climate change is it's a much broader issue than how it affects the weather or land. It will, for Indigenous peoples, it will affect survival, it will affect transmission of knowledge, it will affect so many other elements of their lives in self-determination and so on. And the other thing I thought it was interesting to mention in this context, in terms of an effective reparation, is that we have to think of reparations with this big picture type of lens. It cannot focus on specific circumstances of a case. It cannot focus on harms that have already occurred. It cannot focus on compensation, financial compensation. It cannot be backward looking. So reparations need to be forward looking in the sense of thinking of what kind of systemic changes need to be in place to ensure that the harms that have already occurred and are the object of that case do not happen again. So I think it has to, and that's why I like the human rights treaty bodies here, because they have this human rights approach to let's ensure that this doesn't happen again. So it has to be about not just compensating the communities for harms that they have suffered, but thinking about what states need to do, what kind of obligations should they have. It cannot just be, it has to be about accountability, but it has to be more than that. It has to be about restoration. It has to be about mitigation. It has to be about transformation of state behavior, of attitudes, of relationship with Indigenous communities. And at the same time, it has to be about communities leading that conversation. And when we're thinking about actions or measures like mitigation or restoration, it should also involve restoring ownership over land. It should also involve restoring communities' relationship with land, sort of connecting to what Dr. Barume said just now. So I think there's this interesting perceiving climate change or the climate crisis very broadly, in the sense of including all of its aspects, including all of the dimensions of Indigenous lives that are affected by climate change, but also thinking about reparations as something that can encompass all of this multidimensional context too. I think I'm reaching close to 5 minutes. So I'm going to stop there, and then I will think about. I'll keep talking later in the next question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alves. Thank you both. You've talked about a very powerful theme that is cutting across right now in African Union, and of course into the larger debate of the climate change. So listening to both of you, I'm struck by how these perspectives complement each other. We have lived practices and philosophy, you see, right? And so I like the idea of accountability, restoration, and mitigation. I was speaking to one of my grandmothers in the village when we were teaching them about REDD+ and carbon credit. We put together accountability, restoration, and mitigation of this most emerging thing that we're facing right now as a human race, is that there are issues that the community do not know. I would say that we are commodifying so much the restoration debate, so that we are asking communities to live their lived experiences of in their cosmological ideology or within their own biocultural rights frameworks. So the laws that they do have, how they live in nature. So that you are asking them. So this is the story about my grandmother telling us that, are you telling us so that we move away from this vast land that we have, instead of getting medicine and grazing our animals in this land that we have, so that we now get money from, the hair that we sell, we balance money from big companies. She doesn't know about Netflix. She doesn't know about Meta giving us money, or in future, or even right now, right? So what barriers still prevent Indigenous peoples from contributing to or benefiting from climate reparations framework? I'll go fast to Dr. Barume. What are those barriers that will still prevent Indigenous peoples from contributing to or benefiting from the climate reparation frameworks? As you may have seen from your past work at the African Commission and the United Nations, what are those ideas that you have? Please share with us, Dr. Barume.
Thank you, Carsten, and thank you, really. And let me commend my co-panelists for the insights from really technical comments. Just to say that the concept of reparation, in my view, presupposes, if you look in, you open the concept, I think you found element like qualitative quantification of the damage or assets. You will find inside some element of qualitative estimation as well. It has to include, in my view, also some redress of some historical dispossessions. It's about restoration. These elements need to be taken into account to really talk substantively and meaningfully about reparation. How can you possibly apply or repair something that you don't know what kind of damage has been done, that doesn't take into account the historical loss that the subject or the individual or community have suffered, or doesn't estimate the qualitative value of Indigenous people's land, for instance. So what I'm trying to say is the concept of reparation is actually almost meaningless when first those historical injustices suffered by Indigenous people in being dispossessed of the land are not recognized. Second, when there is no sort of quantification of the indigenous contribution to climate change. Let me say something. Today is clearly accepted that a big part of the biodiversity remaining on Earth are located on indigenous people's lands. Second, it says that over 50% or literally of transition mineral, transition energy projects are taking either near or on indigenous people's lands. So indigenous people remaining resources, because they have been losing resources and land for decades, the remaining sort of pillar on which the whole climate change sort of solution will be built are actually located on or near indigenous people's land. So if we need to meaningfully talk about reparation for indigenous people in relation to climate change, I think the stakeholders, including state, faith, civil society, and all the different actors really need to go back a little bit and do some homework on accepting that indigenous people have claims that need to be redressed first, looked into, acknowledged, and redressed. And then the concept will have a meaning, in my understanding. Without it, it's likely to become that indigenous people are asked once more to pay a heavy price for climate change, because their voice had been ignored in the past. The powerful sort of actors overrunning their very presence and making their voice literally unheard. So in my view, the barrier is really conceptual. The main barrier today of indigenous people, the reparation concept is conceptual. They have to look at the concept of reparation through an indigenous people right perspective, which should include recognition of past injustices in relation to loss of land and resources, quantification, and real now reevaluation of the important role that indigenous people are to play for both biodiversity in the coming year, but also for key area like transition and energy transition. Thank you. I think I stop there and I can come back.
Thank you, Dr. Barume. And before Dr. Ayla comes in, and sorry to cut you short, keep those ideas that you were going to say, because I have an update. I'm reliably informed that Miss Lesle Jansen's video recording is ready, and she has recorded a message that explores how African indigenous movements are reframing the climate finance through rights-based approaches, and how community-led ecological restoration can itself be a form of reparation. Now, as that comes up, Wali Musipala and the rest of my team, as they bring up that video, I'd like to tell you that to thank both of you, Dr. Barume and Dr. Ayla, for your sacrifice, and as well, Lesle Jansen in Cape Town. But she is deep in the community, doing work that we are talking about right now. That's why she's not able to make it. And we're so happy to have her as well here, even in absence, in person, but with the recorded video. So as soon as it comes up, we will listen to her. But before that happens, as the technical people do that, Dr. Ayla, you can give your thoughts as well on that perspective, as Dr. Barume has also done that. Welcome.
Thank you, Carson, and thanks again, Dr. Barume, for really deep considerations about this topic, and really important ones. And I think I've just reinforced that really, I really like the There's this urgency of whenever we're dealing with any claims brought by Indigenous peoples, including in the context of climate change, we need to think about historically all the the colonial practices, the colonial mindset that led to those circumstances, and in acknowledging the role of Western state law and Western state governments and such to put Indigenous communities often in a marginalized position, often dispossessed of their land, dispossessed of their culture. So I like that the how fundamental that is. I'll stop now so we can watch the video and then I'll conclude.
I am so sorry, Dr. Ayla. We'll come back to you. We'll give you your full time again. Let's listen to Lesle Jansen.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Carson. Thank you very much to yourself and Kabarak University for this invitation. I'm very honored to participate in the session. And I think this is a very important conversation that Kabarak University is hosting. I think the time needs a reflection such as this. And I'm happy to share my thoughts on this theme that is asked to respond to the necessary link between faith values and environmental protection. Firstly, if I can start off by introducing myself, I'm from the Indigenous Khoi community in South Africa, and I live on what we call the Cape Flats. It's a flat land. We live next to what is for us a very important monument and sacred space almost. It's our mountain called Table Mountain. So it's a very beautiful landscape that I'm from, and I'm happy to share our experiences as which I think pertains quite strongly to this topic of today. I am inspired to refer to, if I think of the link between faith and environmental protection, for me, the natural discussion for me comes to the ethic of stewardship. It's about stewardship. I think stewardship encapsulates to me, the first thing I think of when I think of the communities that we work with, the Indigenous communities, because I'm also a lawyer, and we give legal support to a lot of Southern Africa Indigenous communities. And if I was to use a word to characterize what I've observed over the years, these communities are doing, whether it's in the area of fisheries, whether it's in the area of plants, animals, I would say that I've observed an ethic of stewardship, and they fought very hard all these years to be able to continue that mandate, that ethic of stewarding these natural resources. No one paid them. They don't get paid for it. For the most part, it is part of their life. It's deeply integrated and part of who they are. And if I was to go further with the ethic of stewardship, I've observed over the years that it comes from a very, very deep place. And I, as a believer myself, I do notice, and I have noticed, that there's strong parallels for me between these communities that are stewarding and what is set out in the very beginning of the Bible, to manage what he has left for us to utilize and look after and enjoy. And I think those first instructions, these communities, for me, are embodying what is expected of our Creator with those first instructions. And I think that is something so beautiful to observe. And it has inspired me over the years to do what I do, because I've recognized that what these people are doing comes from somewhere so deep, somewhere so sacred, somewhere so special, and it was given over to them from generation to generation. And it in some ways has also saddened me at times, because these people are delivering a service to the environment, to the world. They've got nothing back for it, nothing meaningful back for it. No one is paying them to do it. And we are about to face, and in some parts we have started to face, a very serious climate crisis. And if I was to bet my money anywhere, it would be on these communities that not only are they most vulnerable and susceptible to the effects thereof, but they are going to understand how to manage the situation and life in that moment, because they understand. I've seen the hard context that they live in, the far rural out areas these indigenous communities are from. These indigenous communities and local communities who understands the natural environment is where I would bet my money on, if I can, so to speak. And not only is it about them stewarding, managing, conserving these resources, but there's important values which underpins who they are, underpins what they're about. And I often have to also say that I'm not romanticizing this. It's not a romantic notion. It is real. It is real. The values that these communities underpins, for me, I'm still perplexed by it, and I keep on being quite mesmerized by why people care. And it just brings me to the conclusion that it underpins values of which I think which I think we've lost in many ways, we've forgotten about. It is about care. It is about compassion. It is about justice, about sharing. Sharing for me is almost that key component. So there's definitely in these communities embodying these principles. For me, it has a lot to offer to today, and the kind of problems that we're facing. So as Accra, the organization that I'm from, we are strongly influenced by this ethic of stewardship. It strongly influences how we approach the law. Where in the past, the kind of work history that I come from, it was all about trying to fight and patch broken laws that are strongly skewed towards capitalism, at the cost of oftentimes these communities' lands and territories. We've now completely shifted. It is not only about, and the focus is not so strongly about wanting to fix only formal laws, but it is about shifting towards communities' ways of life, their knowledges, their protocols, their values, and to give that legal recognition, to give that legal protection, and rather to put our energy into seeing how that knowledges, especially in the context of our climate crisis, our biodiversity losses, how do we already recognize that as already existing laws that needs its protection, and how do we accelerate that, because time is against us. So that ethic of stewardship is a big component of how we see the way forward as Accra. It is all about using legal tools and methodologies that is not only about the normal system of going through parliament, working for 5, 6, 10 years to get a law that maybe might have some sort of impact, but we already feel the shift once the shift is shifting it back to the recognition of communities' knowledges, communities' indigenous ways of life, the indigenous ways of managing their local arrangements, local institutions. We can already see that it does impact government when communities comes forward and they come with the basis of their knowledges, their cultural property, and the legal weight it has to it, and the kind of authority. When they take that kind of authority with the state, we are already starting to see that shift. So for us as Accra, that is really where we want to anchor our work in communities, affirming their way of life, affirming their knowledges, affirming their contribution to the climate crisis. In a higher power, in their God, what that offers to environmental protection, it is that is definitely a deep, inspiring component for Accra and a big motivation of our work. So with that said, I leave my message there. And
Thank you so much. We want to thank Ms. Lesle Jansen, and thank you for the technical team at Kabarak University for playing Ms. Jansen's video. What an amazing story there. Tied to the stories that come directly from the community. I heard stewardship, that Indigenous ethical value systems that are tied to sacred links to Indigenous knowledge systems that are passed down from generation to generation. Amazing. So what I heard is how compassion has been tied to justice, and how communities collectively participate in these cosmological debate and the lived experiences. Now, because we cut short Dr. Alves' comments, would you like to come in shortly, and then I will open up a few questions to the members of the audience who are listening online. Yeah, you can also write those questions there, and I can pick one or two that can speak. Welcome, Dr. Alves.
Thank you, Carson. I'm just gonna wrap it up. Really, what I started talking about earlier, and connecting now also with what Lesle said, which was amazing sharing of her experience in her work as well with Indigenous groups. And yeah, I just think when you're thinking about reparations, on top of those actions or measures for states that I mentioned, mitigation of risk, restoring land rights, restoring communities, stewardship of land, stewardship of natural resources, in transforming attitude. I think it's also beyond connected to this acknowledgement of the past injustices, acknowledgement of the whole context of colonial injustice that Indigenous peoples have been subjected to, which is an ongoing thing. It's addressing that also through what I see as redistribution. So redistributing in the context of the state, or even internationally, redistributing power in decision making, power in leading the conversation about these topics, power in managing the measures that end up being taken. So making sure that those communities who have the knowledge of how to have a sustainable relationship with land are at front stage in those conversations. Also redistributing resources. So making sure that they have the resources to implement their knowledge on sustainable relationship with land. And redistribution of voice, just making sure that those voices are elevated and are heard in those conversations. So redistribution, I think it's a concept that also addresses what Lesle was just saying in her message of the clashes between the capitalist values that have been also working to marginalize those communities and silence those communities, in how they clash with community values of stewardship and caring. So I think restriking a balance between those things and making sure that communities are elevated and heard and have power in decision making and managing the actions to be taken. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I forgot to ask you, how do we pronounce your name? I don't want to continue pronouncing it in a wrongly.
You've been doing a great job. It's pronounced Ayla, but Ayla. Yeah, I'm Brazilian, and even in Brazil, people mispronounce it all the time. So honestly, I don't mind you.
Thank
I'll
you.
know you're talking about me, so you can call me whatever you want.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ayla. I now say it correctly. Dr. Barume, any last words? I actually think I have a question for Dr. Barume. Before Dr. Barume, sorry, Dr. Ayla Alves, you talked about the reminder that the reparation isn't only backward looking, like it's forward, creating a commitment to live differently in the earth. And so, yeah, it's not just a question, it's a comment. And I think I like that so much, thinking about the whole reparation debate. I'm going to have more to say about that, but I wanted to ask Dr. Barume on quickly, just like in a minute or two, to both of you actually, but this one goes to Dr. Barume. Can rituals or oral traditions, I wouldn't like to call it rituals, but those spiritual practices, indigenous practices, oral traditions, and sacred sites play a role in restoring climate balance? And to Dr. Ayla, what barriers still prevent indigenous peoples from contributing to or benefiting from the climate reparation, as you look into that forward-looking idea? First, to Dr. Barume, quickly, just like 2 minutes each. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Carsten. I think indigenous people's beliefs or that section of traditional knowledge, as we said, is embedded in their right to land, territories, and resources. It actually means I think, in my view, for indigenous peoples, reparation equals restitution. The concept of reparation in relation to climate change for indigenous people equals restitutions, because it's indigenous peoples have shown that they are actually part of the key to climate crisis. And so the climate crisis has actually helped indigenous people to reveal what the rest of the world has lost, how the traditional knowledge, the loss of traditional knowledge by the majority of people living on Earth have been destructive. And it's for that reason that, as we said, most biodiversity and most remaining key resources for climate change are on indigenous people's land. So in my view, it has, the world simply needs to go back to the senses and really, and I think the world is sliding towards that. But it has to do it correctly and through a right-based framework. So it doesn't actually escalate the problem and do as the same way as business as usual by ignoring the substantive importance of indigenous people contribution.
Thank you, Dr. Barume. Dr. Alves.
Thank you, Carson. Thank you again, Dr. Barume. And I'll follow up on that and also on something that Leslie mentioned earlier in terms of barriers for Indigenous benefiting, contributing to reparations. And generally, I think to the Western legal system in courts of law, it's also this colonial legacy that we have to insist on a Western cultural and intellectual superiority over Indigenous knowledges and Indigenous legal systems and normative systems, which is a fallacy. Obviously, it's just what we as non-Indigenous lawyers, in my case, also in case of Leslie, of only validating the law or the knowledge that is produced through a certain methodological process of rigor and something, but that is just the Western perspective. And I think we have to acknowledge that and start rethinking that to welcome and to find ways to respectfully engage with Indigenous knowledges, with Indigenous legal systems, which are very much related to sustainable relationship with land and cosmovision and so on, in courts of law. And that includes the process of thinking of reparations. So it's understanding that this barrier of epistemology validity doesn't exist. Indigenous knowledges and laws are just as valid. And in working with communities in a two-way relationship from the side of courts to respectfully acknowledge this that this barrier should not exist and understand the validity of those knowledges and legal systems, and from the communities to be willing to share that knowledge and sort of walk us through how to access, understand, and use that knowledge in ways that are sustainable. And then back to our role as lawyers in the Western legal system to find ways to effectively protect that knowledge so it's not appropriated and misused once that two-way communication is established, that agreement is established. So I think it always has to be this embracing of a plural epistemic approach to the climate crisis, to addressing any kind of issues that involve Indigenous people's rights in the Western legal system, and just being respectful and making sure that the communities are heard and have their input in any decision making, and also in how the law develops in courts of law as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ayla Alves and Dr. Albert Barume for your insightful knowledge. I'm surprised that I haven't received any questions to all these great knowledge and insights that you've shared from the topic today. I like the link to traditional knowledge now, or Indigenous knowledge, to the topic of reparations and what the courts have been saying. I'm also wondering how we can tie the advisory opinion on climate change from, was it ICJ? So all the discussion obviously doesn't end here, but as we come to a close, I'd like to offer a synthesis of what we've had. First, Indigenous cosmologies remind us that climate reparation begins in the spirit before it manifests in law, and we've heard our panelists share about that, including even Leslie, who is not here with us but has shared the same. It is about restoring harmony between the people and the earth. Second, I see that there's legal and policy frameworks, whether through the what we've heard about the African, as we know, African Charter, or for example, United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, or even the domestic jurisprudence. It must recognize the Indigenous knowledge as a living science. And I'll give some shout outs to my research supervisor, Ms. Melissa, who pushed me to look into that living science in Indigenous knowledge, but now in legal pluralism. You see, so that is what I've also seen is the practical reparation that happens when communities themselves lead restoration of forests, of rivers, of identity. You see, so Dr. Barume reminded us that the recognition without restitution is incomplete justice. Leslie has also talked about those Indigenous-led models in the community that lead models of restoration that already exists in Africa. And we've seen also Dr. Ayla talking about what is in the courts and the reflection of those decisions that are also that are beginning to see that reparations are not just as compensation, but as transformative, forward-looking justice within the broad realm of climate change debate. Now, to borrow again from Laudato Si, our goal is not just to amass information, but also to become painfully aware that we have to transform that awareness into new habits of the heart. So together, all these things that they call us to climate reparation is not just charity, it's not voluntarism, it is a covenant. Even though we volunteer our times to discuss and put it in broader perspective as we've seen today. So before we end, because we have to transition to the next session, and also to thank everyone who has been listening. I would before I thank my panelists, I would like to thank our dean, Professor John Osogo Ambani, is listening here, actively listening. Also the patron of Faith and Environment Project, who is also the editor-in-chief of Kabarak University Press. Mr. Humphrey Sipala is also listening here. The provost of Kabarak University, I don't know if he's still here. Also, my research supervisor, this is a special, Miss Melissa Mungai, who pushed me into that aspect of legal pluralism of bicultural protocols. And Dr. Barume, I would like everyone to know that your book on indigenous land rights of indigenous peoples of Africa also inspired me since the first time that you autographed that book at the University of Pretoria Center for Human Rights. Thank you for inspiring me through. Miss Ayla, I believe this is the beginning of us interacting, not only me, but students who are listening. Some are on YouTube, listening on YouTube. It's shared across the channels of Kabarak University. Also, some are here and they're going to read more and to delve into these discussions. And of course, many will quote what you've said because they are scholars in their own right. So I thank you all for your time, for sacrificing a lot of time that the time and the effort that you've shared. We want to thank you so much. Also in absence, my sister Lesle Jansen from South Africa, Cape Town. We also want to thank her and for passing on the wisdom and all of those engaging debates and openness and curiosity. So I don't know how we can end. Mwalimu Sipala, are you here? If you would like to close this before we pass over to Paresa.
Okay.
I don't know if Mwalimu is in a position to talk. If not, I will pass to Paresa. Thank you so much all for listening to us. I appreciate this, and bye-bye. I'll pass to Paresa.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kasim, for a wonderful session. Thank you, Dr. Albert and Dr. Ayla. That was actually a wonderful session. So we're going to have a lunch break for the next, for those joining us from the East African time, we're going to have a lunch break for the next 1 hour. So we're going to convene here back at 2. So 1 hour, 30 minutes, actually, I've received confirmation that it's actually 1 hour, 30 minutes. So in the next 1 hour, 30 minutes, we're going to have a break and we'll be back here. Thank you so much, Carson, in the previous panel. So you're all welcome to another wonderful session after the break.